Before this story begins, take a moment. If you believe that some mistakes are quiet, that regret doesn't scream, but whispers, and that one small moment can change everything, then you're in the right place. Please subscribe to the channel, because the stories we tell here aren't just stories. They are confessions. They are warnings. And sometimes, they are mirrors. Now let me tell you how my regret began. They say regret never shows up when you make the mistake. It doesn't rush in with alarms or flashing lights. It doesn't stop you at the door and demand you turn back. No. Regret is patient. It waits. It waits until the world grows quiet, until the noise of the day fades, until you're alone with your thoughts, and there's nowhere left to hide. That's when it comes. Soft, heavy, unavoidable. For me, regret didn't arrive with a dramatic choice or a reckless act. It began with something so small, so ordinary, that I didn't even recognize it as a turning point. Just one moment. One decision. One door I chose to open instead of walk past. That Tuesday started like any other. Nothing about it felt important. Nothing about it warned me that my life was about to bend in a direction I could never fully straighten again. My husband, Michael, had left early that morning for a business trip. He kissed my cheek at the door, reminded me to lock up, and promised to call before bed. The house always felt different when he was gone. Not empty exactly, but unfinished. Like a sentence cut off halfway through. I worked late that evening. The kind of day that leaves your body moving on habit alone. Your mind frayed. Your patience thin. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sky had already darkened, and the windows of the house stared back at me, quiet and still. I remember thinking how much I wanted a shower and sleep. That's all. Nothing more. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and dropped my keys into the bowl by the entryway. The familiar smell of home greeted me, clean, neutral, safe. And then I heard it. A sound so faint I almost missed it. Water. Dripping. Somewhere upstairs. My heart skipped, not from fear, but from surprise. Liam. My stepson. He must have come home early from university. Liam wasn't loud. He wasn't careless. He moved through life quietly, like someone afraid of disturbing the world around him. Since his mother passed away, he carried himself as if grief had reshaped his spine, shoulders slightly curved, gaze often distant, thoughts locked behind his eyes. He valued privacy, protected it. So the sound of running water, this late, this careless, felt wrong. I set my bag down slowly and climbed the stairs. Each step felt louder than it should have. At the top landing, I saw the bathroom door slightly open. Steam curled into the hallway, thick and ghost-like, catching the dim light. Liam never left doors ajar. Never. I paused, my hand resting on the banister, unsure why my chest suddenly felt tight. Then the water stopped. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, and from within it came a sound I was not prepared for. A sobi. Soft. Broken. Uncontrolled. Not anger. Not frustration. Something deeper. Something fragile. My breath caught in my throat. Liam. I whispered. No response. I should have walked away. I should have respected the boundary he so carefully built around himself. But concern has a way of disguising itself as permission. I knocked once, lightly, and pushed the door open just enough to see inside. He was sitting on the floor, fully dressed, back pressed against the cold tile wall. His knees pulled close, arms wrapped around himself like he was trying to keep something from spilling out. His shoulders trembled. His eyes were red, unfocused, lost somewhere far from that small bathroom. My heart broke in a way I hadn't expected. I'm fine, he muttered without looking at me. But his voice betrayed him. Nothing about him was fine. I lowered myself a few feet away, careful not to invade his space, careful not to startle him. I let the silence breathe between us. You don't have to be, I said gently. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. What's going on, Liam? He rubbed his face with trembling hands, dragging them down slowly, as if searching for words he couldn't quite reach. I don't know what's wrong with me anymore, he whispered. I can't sleep. I can't think. It feels like I'm disappearing. The words hit me harder than I expected. Fear threaded through his voice. Not dramatic, not loud, but raw. The kind of fear that grows quietly in the dark. Since his mother's death, grief had lived between us like an unspoken guest. Always present. Never acknowledged. I wanted to help him. To anchor him. To take the weight he had been carrying alone. But my hand hovered uselessly in the air, caught between instinct and restraint. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Two people bound by loneliness, standing on opposite sides of something neither of us fully understood. "You're not broken," I finally said. The words came out barely louder than a breath. "You're human. And you've been carrying too much for too long." His eyes lifted to meet mine. They glistened with something dangerously close to hope. "Do you really think it gets better?" he asked. I hesitated. Just for a second. Then nodded. "Ido." And in that moment, I meant it for both of us. When I left the bathroom, the air felt heavier than before. Like something fragile had shifted. Something I couldn't see but could feel settling into place. That night, sleep refused to come. The house felt different. Too quiet. Too aware. I kept seeing his face when I closed my eyes. That look. That silent plea. I had stepped into something delicate. The thin space between care and dependence. Between comfort and something far more dangerous. And I didn't yet understand the cost. The days that followed were not loud. There were no arguments. No dramatic confrontations. No visible cracks for anyone else to notice. But something had changed. And once something shifts inside a home, it never truly goes back to the way it was before. Liam avoided me. Not obviously. Not rudely. It was subtle. The kind of distance only noticeable when you're looking for it. He left rooms just as I entered them. Answered questions with short, careful words. Kept his eyes lowered whenever our paths crossed. At breakfast, his chair remained empty longer than usual. At dinner, he ate quickly and disappeared upstairs before I could ask how his day had been. I told myself it was nothing. He was grieving. He was young. He needed space. That was the story I repeated in my head, over and over, until it almost sounded like the truth. But guilt has a quiet way of making itself known. It seeps into small moments. Like the way my chest tightened every time I heard his door close. Or how I replayed our conversation in the bathroom late at night, analyzing every word, every pause, every look. Had I said too much? Had I crossed a line I didn't even realize existed? Or worse, had I become something he now depended on? Michael called every evening from his hotel room. His voice was warm, familiar, steady, grounded in a world that still made sense. "How's everything at home?" he asked one night. "Fine," I replied too quickly. The word felt thin in my mouth. I didn't tell him about Liam's tears. Didn't mention the weight in the house. Didn't confess the way I felt like I was walking through rooms filled with invisible tension. Some things felt too delicate to put into words. And some things felt wrong to share at all. One afternoon, I found Liam sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his phone but not really looking at it. The house was quiet. Sunlight spilled across the counter, catching dust in the air. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he said softly. I looked up from the sink, my hands still wet. "About what you said," he continued. "About things getting better." I nodded, unsure where this was heading. "I want to believe that," he said. "I really do. But it feels like something's missing." He finally met my eyes. Like part of me is still stuck back there, with her. His words landed heavily. I felt the instinct rise, to fix, to soothe, to step in where pain lived. But I had learned something since that night. Not all pain is meant to be carried by someone else. You'll find your way, I said carefully. But you can't look for the light inside another person. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew they were as much for me as they were for him. He nodded slowly. Didn't argue. Didn't ask questions. Just accepted the answer with a quiet understanding that felt far older than his years. That night, I stayed awake long after the house went silent. The clock in the kitchen ticked steadily, each second stretching longer than the last. I thought about how easily concern can become attachment. How quickly kindness can blur into responsibility. How dangerous it is to feel needed in the wrong way. One moment. That's all it ever takes. A look held too long. A word spoken too gently. A door opened instead of left closed. I realized then that regret doesn't begin with betrayal. It begins with proximity. With good intentions that aren't checked in time. With boundaries that soften just enough to feel harmless. And once they do, you don't notice the shift until it's already happened. That I began to notice how carefully I moved around the house. Not physically, emotionally. Every word felt measured. Every glance felt intentional. Every silence felt louder than speech. Liam was still distant, but now the distance carried weight. It wasn't avoidance anymore. It was awareness. We both knew something fragile existed between us, something neither of us wanted to name out loud. In the mornings, I heard him moving around upstairs before I left for work. By the time I came down, he was gone. In the evenings, I heard his door close just before I reached the hallway. We had turned into quiet observers of each other's presence, close yet careful. One evening, the power went out. No storm. No warning. Just darkness swallowing the house. I lit a candle in the kitchen, its small flame casting shadows across the walls. The silence felt heavier without the hum of electricity. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Liam appeared at the doorway, hands tucked into his sleeves, eyes adjusting to the dim light. The power company said it'll be back in an hour, he said. I nodded. Thanks for telling me. We stood there. The candle flickered between us. For the first time in days, neither of us retreated. I didn't mean to make things awkward, he said suddenly, voice low. After that night, my heart tightened. You didn't, I replied quickly. You were going through something real. He shook his head slightly. I just don't want to be a problem. The words struck deeper than he realized. You're not, I said firmly. But sometimes people confuse support with solutions. And not everything can be fixed by someone else. He absorbed that quietly. Then he nodded. That nod mattered more than anything else he could have said. The power returned soon after, the lights snapping on too brightly, breaking the moment. And just like that, we returned to our separate corners. But something had shifted again. Not closer. Clearer. Still, clarity doesn't erase temptation. And temptation doesn't always look like desire. Sometimes it looks like usefulness. Like being needed. Like being the one someone turns to when they feel lost. Michael returned home 2 days later. The house filled with familiar noise again. Suitcase wheels, laughter, the comfort of routine. He hugged me tightly, kissed my temple, asked how everything went. All good, I said. This time it was almost true. Liam greeted him politely, warmly even. The distance between us faded in Michael's presence, like it had never existed. But I knew better. Late that night, lying beside my husband, staring at the ceiling, I understood something clearly for the first time. Not all lines are crossed with action. Some are crossed in the mind. In hesitation. In justification. In the quiet relief of feeling important to someone who is hurting. That was where the danger lived. And that was where I had to stop it. Because regret doesn't just punish mistakes. It punishes the moments you almost made one, and knew better.